Welcome, everybody. We're going to get started in a few minutes here. We're just going to give some more time for people to get on. All right, we still have some people filtering in, but we are going to get started here. I just like if the panelists that are going to be joining us tonight can just come on the screen when you're ready, and then I'm going to get the discussion started.
Alex, you have to let me open the video for me.
Okay. Give me 1 second. You should be able to use your video now.
Okay, great.
Okay, at this point in time, we're going to get started. I'd just like to introduce Mayor Tara Prupis to start the meeting off.
Thank you, Alex. So good evening, everybody. I thought it was really important that we come together as a community tonight to talk about Ida. It was completely devastating to our community. And I know that a lot of people have questions, and there has also been misinformation floating around that we need to address and just get all the facts out about what happened that night and also what we're planning to do. So tonight we're going to go through the history of flooding in Millburn Township, beginning with Irene and Floyd and Irene. And we're going to talk about what happened the night of Ida. We're going to talk about what happened after Ida and how the township is going to move forward together. And that night was traumatic for a lot of people. And I just want to thank the fire department and the police, the DPW, the first aid squad, and town hall for that night and for all the work that's been done and all the volunteers. Our community has really come together during this past month. And Alex, you have worked tirelessly for our community. So thank you so much. And I just want to let everybody know that John Marshall from Congressman Tom Malinowski's office is watching this webinar, and Senator John McKeon will watch the recording of it. He was unable to join us tonight, but he is aware of this conversation. And also we are starting, we are going to have a flood mitigation advisory committee. And if you follow the township social media, you saw that there was a post out today that we will be accepting applications through Thursday. And if you're interested in joining that advisory committee, please email letusknow@millburntwp.org. And I think that's all I have for you tonight. And John Rushke, thank you. You've been with the town, working for the town, and also the Rahway River Mayor Council. So thank you for being with us tonight.
Thank you, Mayor. So Alex, I'll share my screen and start the presentation.
Yeah, I'm just going to do a quick master of ceremonies type of thing real quick,
Okay.
just so people understand what the format's going to be tonight. So first, I want to thank everybody also for joining us tonight for this conversation on flooding and how to move forward as a township, as a community, after the devastation of Tropical Storm Ida. We're going to have a brief presentation by Mott McDonald. John Rushke and Kevin Nolstad are here from Mott McDonald, who have been involved in the township for some years regarding flood mitigation and hydraulics in the township. So we're happy to have them here to be able to explain some of the history, as well as some of the mitigation projects that have gone on in the township. So this is going to be approximately 30 minutes. We are then going to follow that presentation up with a conversation with our community and our residents. We'll have an hour-long question and answer following the presentation. So there were approximately 260 people that signed up for this discussion tonight on flooding. And so we want to be respectful that everybody probably has something that they want to ask or something that they want to say. So we're just asking that everybody keep their, their story, their concerns, their questions to 3 to 5 minutes so that we can get to as many people as possible. This is not the end of the conversation. I want to be clear about that. We'll try to answer as many questions as possible, but we're also here to listen and to utilize this conversation to make improvements to all facets of the township's emergency response and mitigation efforts moving forward. We also have on the call tonight our township engineer, Martha Callahan, our fire chief, Robert Echeverria, various members of the township committee, Maggie Miggins and Diane Eglow and Richard Wassman, who are also here listening so that we can hear what the residents have to say and that we can bring that back and start to make those improvements and answer some of those questions. So with that, I am going to turn it over to John, who's going to do the presentation. I will also be jumping in for a portion of the presentation when it comes to the township preparation response and things like that. But we hope that you find this informative, as well as we provide an opportunity for residents to share as well. So John, with that, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alex. Let me share my screen. Okay, is it up, Alex?
Yep, I see it.
Excellent, excellent. All right, good evening, everyone. My name is John Rushke. I work with Mott McDonald. Kevin Nolstad is joining me. Kevin and I have about 30 years experience working in stormwater management and flood mitigation, and Kevin has about 25 years of experience. We've done a number of flood mitigation projects along the Rahway River. We studied it extensively. And in fact, our firm goes back to doing work back to the 70s and even working in the township in the 70s. So we have a long history of working in the area and knowledge of the area. Things that we want to touch on tonight, we're just going to talk about the flooding, talk about some statistics, just get an appreciation of what actually Ida was compared to Irene, Floyd, and just other statistics. Talk about past mitigation efforts that were completed in the township. I'm going to touch on the Army Corps of Engineers, the work that they've done studying the Rahway River and where we are and where we hope to go with the Army Corps. We'll again end up talking about what happened during Irene and after Irene. And then lastly, we'll talk about the next steps and looking forward. As an engineer, we look at statistics, and what this illustrates is a 1 year, 2 year. That's the rainfall event that you would anticipate within a particular year event. So within a 1 year storm, we would anticipate a storm in the magnitude of 2.85 inches during 1 year. And so if you extend that out, if you look at a 10-year storm, you would expect 5.22 inches to occur within a 10-year period. And these are maximum storms. So you have a 25, 50. These are all typical design storms that we take in consideration as an engineer if we're designing soil erosion sediment control structures, stormwater structures. If we're going to design stormwater improvements within a local road, within the catch basins and drainage, we would typically design for a 25-year storm event. Mitigation project, we tend to go to a 50-year, but we tend to target for 100-year. So in Essex County, in Millburn, basically a 100-year storm event, statistically, we would expect a storm of 8.66 inches every 100 years. And we're certainly seeing that to occur with, we've had Floyd, we had Ida, and we had Irene over the last 20 years, which are major storm events. Ida, when you compare it to these statistics, it was slightly less than a 100-year storm event. Irene was slightly more. So that's when if you look at it from a perspective of statistics, that's where Ida, fell into. And so every storm event is very unique. And Ida was unique in the sense that the storm, over a 24-hour period, the intensity of the storm was very intense over a short period of time, versus Irene, where Irene it extended over a longer period of time. And in fact, there were several storms even before Irene. So with Irene, the ground was saturated. It was a totally different scenario. But Ida was unique, where the stormwater, the precipitation occurred over a very short period of time. So we had a very spike in the rainfall event. So when we look at the Royal River, we have the East Branch and the West Branch, and we have stream gauges that monitor the flow in the river. And we have a gauge that's located just down gradient of the South Mountain Reservation on the Royal River. And for Irene, it kind of shows over this time period of how the elevation in the river, changed over time, and it was a gradual change for Irene. But for Ida, it was a very distinct jump in the flood elevation, and then it trickled over time. So very unique situation with Ida, with the intensity of the storm that happened again over a very short period of time. And then we jump to the East Branch, a similar situation where we saw with Irene, where it was extended over an extended period of time, and the flood elevations were extended. But again, with Irene on both the West and the East Branch, we had a very steep spike in elevation. And in fact, we did have flood elevations at the gauge much higher than at Irene than we had, with Ida than we had at Irene. So we actually did have a higher flood, even though the precipitation was less. The flood elevation was actually higher because of that intensity was so great. And we did in fact see a similar, not as much, but we did see a similar spike that we had with Ida on the West Branch, that Ida was slightly higher than Irene from a flood elevation perspective. From flows, we looked at just downstream of Millburn in Springfield. There's a USGS gauge that monitors flow. And so for Ida, the flow was 8,300, 200 CFS. Irene was slightly higher, and then Floyd was slightly lower. But again, we had these major storm events, which only within a 20-year period. And so again, looking at that stream gauge, looking at it over a period of time, you can see how Floyd, Irene, and then we had Ida, which again, it's just a steeper slope that we've had in the beginning because of that intensity. So again, very unique storm that Ida was. So just some of the key reasons why Millburn floods. And we, from an engineering perspective, we look at basically two different criteria. We look at flow, and flow is the magnitude of water that is conveyed through the river. And what regulates flow is you have your precipitation, time of concentration, and various factors which determine the flow in the river. And conveyance is actually the river itself. It's not just a cross-sectional area of the river, but you also have control structures that are along the river that significantly influence the flood elevations along the river. So here we have the west branch and we have the east branch. And on the east branch, the control structures, we have Vauxhall Road Bridge, which bridge structures are typically control structures. They contract the flows, which ultimately create backwater effects and create flooding under it. And then you have along the east branch, you have the joint meeting sewer crossing. If you know the river at all, there's actually a major sewer pipe that crosses the river, and it does act as an obstruction in the river, and that's again is a control structure. And then you have the confluence of two rivers. So basically, when the west branch is flowing heavy and the east branch, you get backwater effects that are created. So the conveyance of the two rivers actually is a control structure, and it does influence the flood elevations in both the east and the west branches. So as we approach the west branch, on the west branch, we have Ridgewood Road Bridge. Again, bridges are structures that generally contract and restrict flow through them. And so they do end up contributing to the flooding. The Taylor Pond Dam is another control structure. And then as you move up, you have the Millburn Avenue Bridge. You have the Futter Building, as people know, the Futter Building is a building that actually extends over the river. And then you have the concrete channel that you have, and then you have Essex Street Bridge, and then the New Jersey Transit Culvert. So all these structures basically do have a contract the river and regulate the river through Millburn. Some of the past, we'll touch on some of the past flood mitigation projects that have been done in Millburn. And there's been several, and on the East Branch, in fact, we can start off with the raising of the Vauxhall Road Bridge, which was done a number of years ago, and the bridge was actually raised, which allowed more flow to go through, and allowing more flow, it allows the flood elevations to decrease. And then we also had flood walls upstream of Fox Hill Road, and also downstream of Fox Hill Road. We have flood walls that were installed. We also have some two pump stations that are located. We have a Gilbert pump station, which basically the pump station, it controls the local drainage system. The pump stations are limited in capacity. When you look at the capacity, once the river overflows its banks and starts to, and actually the river is flooding the area of Millburn, the pump stations cannot keep up. It's a fraction of the capacity of the river. So really the pump stations function well when you have storm events of saying like a 50-year storm or a 25-year storm. But once you hit a 100-year storm or storms that are approaching the 100-year and the dikes over top, the pump stations are ineffective because you have nowhere to pump it to. It's just flooding. The entire area is flooding due to the river, and there's no way to evacuate that river. The Huron Dike was also constructed and does provide flood protection. There's also a pump station located at this location. It does have an emergency generator associated with this pump station. Again, these are pump stations that work well when the river does not crest and flood the area. They work best with major storm events, like I said, being a 25-year storm, approaching a 50-year storm. But again, when you get into a 100-year storm, these flood pump stations are just ineffective because basically there's nowhere to pump the water to. And then there's other improvements that were done was the local drainage improvements, and local drainage improvements, they complement the pump stations, but they really don't provide flood mitigation when you're looking at flooding from the river. Once the river peaks, the local stormwater system just gets inundated and it becomes ineffective until the flood waters succeed. So but they are very effective and efficiently we're working with the local pump stations. Other improvements that were done, the township has undergone an extensive inflow and infiltration study of the sanitary sewer system. When you do have flooding in the area of floods, the sewer system is impacted, and the study was undertaken and improvements contemplated, again, to reinforce the sanitary sewer so those sewers are not impacted from flooding events. On the West Branch, there has been work historically. I know on Taylor Pond Dam many years ago that there was some work on Taylor Pond Dam, and then historically the concrete flood walls that were installed, and those were improvements from the prior improvements that were there. So less improvements on the West Branch and than the East Branch, but certainly a focal point is both. So when I talk about control structures and the bridges and other confining structures, and it's easy to say, okay, let's raise a bridge or let's widen the bridge. But we also have to be looking at what are NJDEP or the state of New Jersey's regulations on flood controls. And that does dictate a lot of what you can and can't do when you start to talk about flood mitigation, because you physically, and this is really common sense, you don't want to do something in your town which ultimately is just going to flood more in another town. So you got to be sensitive of what you can, how you can. Flood mitigation is not going to create downstream or upstream impacts associated with those proposed improvements. So if you're looking at flood walls, you can certainly put in flood walls, but if those flood walls ultimately just create more flow and impacts downstream, you have to look at how you regulate those walls. And at times you cannot increase, you can only have the flood walls to a certain elevation, because once you exceed a certain elevation, and this is very typical with a 100-year storm event, we typically can't design flood control for a 100-year storm, because the flood walls ultimately change the flow characteristics where you're impacting it, the impacts downstream. So you ultimately need that flood storage that happens during a 100-year storm event in order not to impact your neighbor downstream. So it is very tricky to look when you're looking at flood control, that what you're proposing is not going to create problems downstream or upstream. So it is a challenge when we're looking at coming up with the flood mitigation measures. So with that said, how do we reduce flooding? That's ultimately what people want to know. They want to hear about regulations and the complications of it. They want to know how we're going to reduce it. But unfortunately, the reality is that there's always going to be a larger storm. We typically design, like I said, for like a local drainage system. We design, the standard of care is a 25-year storm event. When we're doing flood mitigation, we focus on 50 or better, trying to approach a 100-year storm. But we have challenges trying to mitigate for a 100-year storm because of the impacts downstream that are potentially result from doing flood walls or other improvements. But even with that said, if we were designed for a 100-year storm, Irene was higher than a 100-year storm, and so it's difficult you have 500-year storms, you have hurricanes, you have climate changes. So when we talk about flood mitigation, you have to be realistic that flood mitigation is actually reducing the frequency of flooding and not eliminating flooding, because ultimately you're always going to have a larger storm that's going to come in. So I just want to touch on again, how do we control flooding? And the Army Corps has extensively reviewed the Raway River. They've studied at least 19 different alternatives to come up with a flood mitigation plan for the entire corridor, from Millburn all the way down to Raway. And fundamentally, the solution for an Army Corps project, there's three things that have to be satisfied. The first one is that you have to come up with a feasible engineering design. It has to meet Army Corps standards, and it has to be functional and meet their requirements. Another requirement, it has to have a positive BCR. A BCR is a benefit cost ratio. And any Army Corps project and many local projects, you look at it from a perspective that the benefits, the cost of the benefits that you're going to receive have to be more than the cost, so that you want to have a BCR ratio of greater than 1, because if the benefits equal the cost, the ratio is 1. So you want the cost to be lower than the benefits. That creates a positive number. So with the Army Corps, that's a red line. The project has to have a positive BCR in order for it to advance and them to endorse it. And the third criteria is stakeholder acceptance. The Army Corps, they could certainly come up with a design and they have a positive BCR, but they will not implement it unless the stakeholders that or benefit from that project will accept it. So those are the 3 things that must be satisfied with when we talk about the Army Corps going forward. And then possible alternatives, like I said, they did evaluate 19 alternatives, and they did not have many alternatives that had a positive BCR. There was one project that they came up with where they were constructing a new dam in the South Orange Reservoir, and from an engineering perspective, it was feasible. They could make it work. From a BCR perspective, it was actually marginal. But the Army Corps, when they presented that to the stakeholders, it was clear that they wanted to make this alternative work. It was the Army Corps and the DP, they wanted to come up with a solution to get that BCR above 1, and they were looking at how to evaluate impacts from environmental impacts and such, and try to work with that BCR. So they were actually looking at this alternative as being favorable, but unfortunately, not all the stakeholders was agreeable for that alternative, and because it would drastically change the characteristics of the South Orange Reservoir. Basically, below the reservoir, the dam would have been constructed, and it would have impacted that lower area. And unfortunately, when the Army Corps looks at these alternatives, they're looking at it from a 10,000-foot level, and they don't get into specific details. And not that I'm saying that this has merit to advance forward, but possibly I would have suggested to them is that they would need to step down from that 10,000-foot level, and perhaps if they really looked at more detail on how to create this dam and actually create more of a reestablish the park setting that's located in the reservation. But it's beyond their scope, unfortunately. So this is an alternative that I know that they're going to bring back to the table, and they're going to discuss it, but it does not get there's not a lot of traction on this because of the impact to the reservation. Another alternative that was looked at was having the Orange Reservoir as the control structure, where it would actually, prior to a storm event, the reservoir would be lowered, and the reservoir would function as a regional detention basin, which would reduce the flow coming out of the reservation. And from an engineering design, the Army Corps determined that this was theoretically it works, but they were concerned with the high risk associated with that, and I'll go through that further. From a BCR, they actually didn't determine the BCR. Preliminary calculations that we looked at, we think it'd be a very high BCR, but it would only be a high BCR if, in fact, the Army Corps doesn't look at the existing the Orange Dam, and if that dam does require any extensive rehabilitation to meet their Army Corps standards, and that may really stress the BCR and bring it close to 1 or less than 1. But it would be certainly have to look at it because it really wasn't studied. And what the but the more positive note on this alternative was the stakeholder acceptance. All the stakeholders prefer this alternative because it doesn't require extensive work within the reservation itself. It really just working within the reservoir, and so really minimal impact to the reservation, and so it has a lot of acceptance from the stakeholders. So unfortunately, the alternatives that we have so far, really these 2 alternatives really haven't panned out with being able to be advanced to the next stages. I did identify a third alternative that has not been studied, which is something that Millburn can propose to the Army Corps during this next phase of study. And would be to ask the Army Corps to look at non-structural in Millburn alone. They can look at non-structural is focusing on the actual structures that are being flooded and how do you protect them from flooding. And so this is an alternative. It's a standard engineering design. It's definitely feasible that can be done. The BCR needs to be studied. It hasn't been studied. And the stakeholder acceptance has not been determined, but it does not require 100% participation into the program. So it is unique in that sense. So alternative 3 that I presented here is something that Millburn can present to the Army Corps when they're looking at alternatives as possibly another scenario to look at as part of their study moving forward. So again, how to reduce the stream flow into Millburn? Like I said, the 2 fundamental criteria is you try to control the flow going through Millburn and then the conveyance structures through Millburn. And basically you have the Orange Reservoir and the basic function of or engineering principle of the alternatives that they're looking at, we're doing work within the South Orange Reservoir, is to in fact reduce the flow that actually flows through Millburn. And they looked at, you can see the size of the Orange Reservoir and trying to construct a similar structure down here, it just requires a lot of impact to the reservation itself. So, but this basically does illustrate when you're looking at the peak flow coming out of the reservation into Millburn, it's that red line, that's the flow over the existing dam spillway. But if you were to take the reservoir and lower the reservoir and modify the outlet structure of the reservoir, you can actually create the flow and then use the reservoir as a detention basin. You can actually reduce the flow into Millburn substantially by controlling it through the reservation. So this is the basic engineering that they're trying to accomplish when they're looking at improvements in the South Mountain Reservation, either using the existing reservoir or constructing a new dam. The theory is the same, that they're trying to construct a detention facility that's going to reduce the flow substantially coming through Millburn, which would drastically impact improve the flooding situation that's present. One of the things that we're looking at is when we're looking at the existing outfall from the dam, because it's an existing dam, there's an existing low-level structure on the dam already. It's a 20-inch pipe that can drain the reservoir, but it actually takes over 10 days in order to lower the reservoir. So if you're looking at a storm event that you're trying to operate the reservoir in a sense where you want to predict a storm that's about to occur and lower the reservoir to get it ready, the existing low flow structure is just too small to accommodate that. So the proposal is to install 2 36-inch pipes. And that 36-inch pipes are critical too, because it's not just about lowering the water in the reservoir to get it ready for a storm, but you also have to regulate the flow through the reservoir so that you don't want the reservoir to fill up too quickly during a storm event. You want the reservoir the elevation in the reservoir to peak when the storm peaks, so you're mitigating the flow to the maximum extent possible. So that's where the necessity is to increase the sizing of the pipe. And this is the concept that was basically proposed to the Army Corps of Engineers. It's basically constructing a new outlet structure within the reservoir itself. We propose to have it as really a nice recreational feature when it's not functioning for flood mitigation, but it could be a fishing pier and have characteristics of some of the other structures that are located in the reservation. But the bypass would be a very unique structure that it would monitor the flow in and out of the reservoir. It will measure stream gauges upstream, downstream, and it would also interact with and react with weather data and actually control the structure through that. So, and then there was also some minor grading and improving the bathymetric characteristics at lower elevations to improve the flood storage in the area. So basically, what was being proposed is forecast informed reservoir operations. It's not a unique situation. The Army Corps does have, they studied this in other locations where basically you're taking the National Weather Service and you're calculating what the storage forecast is going to be. You look at risks associated with that storm, and it dictates how quickly or how slowly you release the flows. And then it's just a constant process where the reservoir is lowered, not in 2 days, but it's lowered over an extended period of time based on the amount of risk of a storm hitting the area and getting it into function. However, the Army Corps, they have really, frankly, dug in their heels regarding their position regarding the bypass, and that this is a quote straight out of the Army Corps District's direction on the future studying that they're going to do on the river. And basically they're saying, do the risks of forecast-based operations in urban watershed coupled with high consequences of failure. They're not going to consider forecast-based operations of the dam. So the Mayor's Council is highly focused and pushing for the bypass, and the Army Corps is at this point is not agreeing. So that's the hurdle that the Mayor's Council has with the Army Corps, is that they need to change their position, that they are willing to look at the bypass. And the Army Corps' position is it's when you have to look at two things. There's one is the urban watershed. Some of these areas where they have done forecasting, it was in much rural areas. It wasn't as built up in this area. So that's one thing that they're concerned about. The other is the high consequences of failure. When we're talking about this bypass, the bypass is only one component of the overall proposal to mitigate the entire Rawway River. There's other improvements, and one of the major improvements that are proposed down is in Cranford, where they're building major dikes to protect the neighborhoods in Cranford. And the Army Corps is concerned that if this doesn't, and given the high cost of the dikes in Cranford, they're concerned that they don't want to put that money out and build those dikes if there's a degree that if there's a possibility the bypass doesn't function, or if it's not in service quick enough, that they're concerned about the money spent on Cranford and downstream, that they're just concerned about that consequences of failures. Because if they just construct the dikes alone in Cranford and other improvements, the BCR is less than 1. So that's the struggle that we're having with this being unique in a situation on this particular forecast. But like I said, one of the alternatives that can be looked at is looked at Millburn alone, or look at the entire watershed, but give some diversity on what is studied, and looking at improvements on the flood prone structures is that FEMA has numerous manuals, and this is this is done, this is not a new technology or anything, looking at wet proofing, dry proofing, elevation, relocation, acquisitions of properties. This is very common things that are done on looking at flood prone structures. So when you're looking at non-structural, and it's strange that they call non-structural, it's non-structural being that it's not flood walls or it's not related to the river, but it's structural actually to the buildings themselves. But this would be an avenue to look at as another option. They may come up with other options to look at, but this is one that Millburn may want to just say, put it on the table just for consideration. Now, I focused all on the Army Corps as being the process, going through the Army Corps of looking at acquisitions and looking at elevations and wet proofing. But there's also, you can look at the FEMA programs, and that's something I know Millburn is going to start to look at, is look at the various different grant programs that are through FEMA, and looking at how that may fund flood mitigation projects. And the FEMA programs is basically the township does have a hazard mitigation chapter in the county hazard mitigation plan. And as part of these grant programs, you do have to identify the project in that program. And the township there's a number of projects that can potentially be looked at that could be funded through these programs. The advantage of going through the Army Corps is that they'll do all the legwork and they'll do all the preliminary design and calculate the BCR. And then it's they'll do all that legwork versus if you go through the FEMA and apply for these grants, the township would have to prepare the application, would have to demonstrate the BCR ratio associated with the improvements and go through that process. Now these are competitive. I don't want to not state that, but they are competitive programs. These programs are national, and I believe through the BRIC there was only 20 projects that were funded for 2020. So very competitive program, but certainly an option. I don't want to discourage it either. It's certainly an option to pursue FEMA grants. And then going, you not only have to go, there's other options of going through not only through the FEMA, but there's also state programs. The New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection also sponsors some programs where you have, I'm just drawing a blank.
John, I can jump in here if you want.
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
All right. So there are a few programs that the township is currently exploring, much to John's last slide. And two of those are the home elevation program through the New Jersey Office of Emergency Management, FEMA. This is just a brief slide discussing that a bit. In that this program allows individual residents to stay in their homes and elevate that again above the basic flood elevation level for that area. It is a complex program and it is lengthy. However, we've already started discussions with New Jersey OEM to learn more about it and understand it more, and because it is a application which the township puts forward to them for a cost share. When it comes to raising homes that may be eligible. And there are some eligibility requirements, but again, we are following Ida, it was a little bit different than in past storms that, we have heard and it has been expressed to us that there's interest in these types of programs, in particular, the house raising or the house elevation program, as well as Blue Acres. Blue Acres is a different type of program run through the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection, in which they look to actually purchase a home and restore those homes to a natural state. So they razz them and they create space through the Green Acres program, which is run by New Jersey DEP. This is a program in which the homeowner has to be a willing participant. And they would purchase a home at pre-storm value. However, the purchase price is not negotiated. It's usually funded after a natural disaster declaration, like we've had here in Essex County and Melbourne in particular. So this is something that we are also exploring, and I'm actually going to make a quick announcement for those residents who may be on the call that are interested in the program. We are going to have an information session with Blue Acres. The director has agreed to provide a brief presentation as well as a bit of a Q&A on Monday, October 4th at 6:30. We'll be setting that up virtually for those who are interested. So just keep a lookout for that information following this meeting sometime tomorrow. These programs are generally more successful when you have contiguous properties that want to participate. They want to create a wide area, an area that is going to have a successful grant application with a higher, as John has been talking about with the Army Corps, benefit cost ratio when it comes to the application. So they get a bunch of properties that are willing to sell and to the Blue Acres program, and that makes the grant application more successful for that. So again, we are having a meeting on October 4th at 6:30 p.m. we will put that information out to the residents and to the community for those that may be interested in that program. Again, it's a willing participant program. The link is on this, and this presentation will be provided on the township website tomorrow. But that link will get you to the application, which needs to be filled out to express your interest in such a program. So we're already at 45 minutes, and I said a half hour, so I'm just going to breeze through this. I know that we've talked a lot already, but I just wanted the community to understand that the township goes through a lot of preparation prior to storms. In particular, right before Ida, we had Henri, which was a concerning storm, but certainly Ida was one that hit us fast and hard, and but we from June until November, we are in prep mode. We are in ready mode when it comes to our Department of Public Works, Fire Department, and Police Department. Prior to Ida, the Police Department brings on additional personnel. They make sure their cars are ready with road closure equipment, and they have a couple extra patrols on the road. The Fire Department readies all pumps and vehicles, and they brought on extra personnel as well prior to the storm. At one point during the storm, they had 19 personnel out and about in rigs and on loaders, helping with the storm response. And Public Works, they probably have the most prep work prior to storms. They lowered the Taylor Park Pond. They do catch basin cleanouts. We have approximately 2,500 catch basins throughout the township. They spend a few days with a few crews going around town and cleaning those out, or any that are clogged or look clogged. They also have a pipes and grates route, which on public property, which consists of 53 pipes and grates that need to be cleaned out prior to storms. They do that. They walk the river. They make sure that there's no major obstructions in the river prior to storms, and make sure that things are clear and able to pass through. There's a lot of preparation that goes on prior to a storm with the various departments, and they do that on multiple occasions. During the flooding, obviously there was an emergency response. Public Works and Fire Department, Police Department all responded, magnificently. They did a lot of great things during that storm. We had approximately 24 stranded motorists up on JFK, Vauxhall Road, several stranded motorists, approximately 100 rescues that took place, whether it was from stranded vehicles, floating vehicles, restaurants, things like that, homes. Many of them were brought to the parking deck and then to the library for safe shelter. And it was an intense operation throughout the storm. As I know, it was an intense moment for all of our residents, but I think that the departments did a great job in responding to the emergency. Post-storm response, we've done quite a few things when it comes to the cleanup of debris, the pumping out of basements, pumping out of backyards. The fire department, again, they had over 650 calls for service, and many of those included pumping out basements, making things safe within a resident so that the cleanup process could start. There's a lot of work that goes into all of this, especially even behind the scenes and dealing with different agencies and making sure that we had our preliminary damage assessment done in fast order, so that when Essex County came to us and the state came to us and FEMA came to us, we were able to provide them with the numbers that they needed to make sure that we got that declaration that everybody was so, hoping for and needed. So that was, there was a lot of work that went into the post-storm response. I'll stop talking about that. Next slide. As the mayor had mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, the Flood Mitigation Advisory Committee is up and running. We're looking for those that are interested. We had mentioned she had mentioned at the beginning of the meeting that we're closing out interest on Thursday. If anybody is interested, please email Flood Mitigation AC at with the subject line to the email address. Let us know at millburntwp.org. It's all on our website. It's all on social media. You can take a look at that. I'm not going to go through any of the other items on this slide because John had already touched on them, and he's already touched on the Mayor's Rahway River Coalition. So at this point, what we're going to do, and I will moderate. John and I will be here to answer. If there's an answer that I think would be better answered by our fire chief or township engineer, I will certainly try to bring them on as a panelist. We will have individuals in attendance, and again, we have 121 people as a part of this discussion, and so we just ask that you keep your comments to 3 to 5 minutes, questions, concerns, whatever they may be. I'm also attempting to answer those who may be on Q&A, but if we don't get to any of them, you can certainly email us at letusknow@millburntwp.org. We want to hear from everybody. We want to hear your story. We're also asking that if anybody has any video of flooding or to send that to us. It's going to be very helpful in our next step process to see where things occurred and how they occurred. And so you can also email them to that email address as well. So with that, we're going to start going through, and we're going to have about approximately 50 minutes to an hour for Q&A. We'll answer as many questions as we can. So with that, I'm going to start letting people on to ask questions. So feel free to raise your hand at this point in time if you wish to ask a question. All right. Hold on 1 second. Having some sort of. All right, just having a little bit of a technical difficulty here. I'm going to do something real quick. All right, let's see if that helps. Apologize. Great, got it. Nirja, coming on. I thought so. Nirja?
Hi, this is Neeraj.
Yeah.
Sorry. Sorry, hi, this is Neeraj. I'm at 819 Ridgewood Road. And I have a couple of questions, but the first one is about the drainage system. Did the town find the reason why the water did not drain from our backyard for more than 12 hours, even though the flash flood event was done? Like, from what we understand, the flash flood event was finished at around 12:30 a.m. But the backyard did not even drain till probably 7-8 p.m. the next day. And that didn't seem like that was something with the river and its drainage system. It was, at least to us, it seems like there was something seriously wrong with the drainage system.
Yeah, that area, we know that the drainage system in that area is substandard. It needs to be improved. That in order to accommodate the drainage in that area, the town would have to approach some of the property owners for easements in those areas, and that certainly is an area that we could look at.
So I'm sorry, so you're saying that there was something wrong with the drainage system? Well,
the drainage systems, drainage systems are many municipal drainage systems are substandard because they were built in the 70s and the 80s. They don't meet the current standards that we would design for today. And so, and some of the structures, if they're on private property, or a portion of it on private property, it's not maintained by the township. So that area in particular, we have thought of making improvements in the past, and it does require coordination with the property owners to secure easements in order to improve that drainage system area.
I'm sorry, so am I getting this right? The drainage systems were designed and built in 1970 and they haven't been improved for last 50 odd years?
And that's common practice. That's, the town does not go to every road and upgrade drainage systems, the town will typically make improvements associated with, if they're doing major road improvements, they may look at doing improvements, but it's not common practice to upgrade drainage systems on every municipal road. And that's common for all towns.
Niraj, I'd just like to step into, because I think what you're also talking about is the backyards of Ridgewood Road, which is as you're aware, are somewhat bowl-like, and they have a depression in them, so it will keep water. There's nothing that is necessarily pumping that water out of that area to the drainage system that's located in the roadway. So I think, it's something, I've taken down your address at 819 Ridgewood Road. So, it's something that we can look at and maybe have an additional conversation about what actually occurred there. But if we're talking about the backyards, there are several areas within the South Mountain area, in particular Ridgewood, Locust, Greenwood, that have these bowl-like areas that do keep water, and it almost acts as a detention basin for some time after this magnitude.
Sure. And I understand that there are some low-lying areas in the community where the water may, stand. And every time there is a flash flood warning, we've seen a puddle of water become, form in our backyard, and we are used to it. I mean, even though we are annoyed with it, but we are used to it. But the fact that there is 8 foot 9 feet water that stays for 12 hours, that to me doesn't look normal. And if you are telling me that somebody has known that for 50 years and hasn't done anything, then I'm a little shocked.
Yeah, and I want to just be clear that we don't necessarily know, without looking at that issue particularly, whether it was the drainage system in the roadway or whether it was the topography of the area in which the water sat. But certainly, again, appreciate you kind of bringing this concern forward so that we can take an additional look at what it is that you're discussing here.
Sure. Thank you. Can I ask a follow-up question on that? I don't want to hog too much time, but
go ahead. You got another minute or so.
Thanks. One, I guess if the intensity of this flood was expected to be so high, why weren't the residents pre-informed? We've seen some flash flood warnings on the phones, but that's all we got. While there were no facilities, no closures in the city that were happening, even for a minor snowstorm, we've usually expected we've usually seen stuff close down, a lot of messages, a lot of coverage. I don't remember any such things happening for this event.
Well, again, appreciate that comment. We will go back and look at our communication prior to and during the storm. However, there were some communications, and we can certainly look at what we did prior to the storm to alert residents to the weather. But as was stated, the quick veracity of the storm was something that was pretty unexpected. It was always a 4 to 6 inch storm, but not over such a brief period of time. But certainly understand your concern in that regard, and we'll take a look at our response.
Right. No, I understand that intensity and speed at which it grew was probably unexpected, but at least the amount of precipitation that was expected was supposedly, based on the chart that John was showing, seems like it was like close to a 100-year event, which means that at least some data, some meteorological data that you guys were seeing would have shown that this was a severe event that was coming.
Okay. Yeah. All right. We're gonna move on, Niraj, if that's okay. We're gonna go on to the next, because we've got about 20 people that have their hands raised. But thank you for your comments. Do appreciate it, and I've taken down your information. Dan Devani.
All right, good evening. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Dan Devani, 23 Greenwood Drive. Alex, thank you very much. John, appreciate the presentation. I guess my question hopefully is a simple one. A lot of information was just provided. What about a recommendation? Or set of recommendations? What should we as a town, what should we as residents, what are the next steps to getting our arms around it? Because 10 years have gone by since Irene, and here we are again. Thank you.
Well, from a having the Army Corps study the river is a significant step. That they're not studying every river in New Jersey or in the country. They're focusing on the Railway, and they, like I said, they did do a study. They looked at 19 alternatives, and they're coming back and no alternative is not acceptable and that's quoting the stakeholders. And so they're being pushed to come up with a suitable alternative. So certainly you have the massive resources of the Army Corps that's going to be looking at it from a regional standpoint. From a local standpoint, we identified creating the subcommittee to discuss some of the local projects that can help mitigate some large storms. A 50-year storm is a significant storm. A 25-year storm is a significant storm, and so certainly those are things that the township can look at and try to manage internally. But when you're talking about the large scale storms of a hurricane of like Ida or Floyd or Irene, those we really do need to look at the Army Corps to come up with practical solutions. I can as an engineer, I can certainly come up with some recommendations, but it doesn't mean that they're feasible. For me to identify a $10 million, $20 million project for the township gets a bit impractical. So we are looking at practical solutions too.
Okay, thank you, John, for that answer, and Dan, certainly more to come as well on sort of and some of the things that we presented tonight with Blue Acres and house raising. These are conversations that we didn't have after Irene, and there were other mitigation projects that were considered and may have not proceeded for one reason or another, which are things that can also continue to be discussed, whether it's from Nirja from Niraj from 819 or yourself on Greenwood. Those projects, backyard projects, are also things that I think the township can continue to evaluate and discuss with the residents. All right, and again, I'm going to apologize if I do mess up anybody's name, but Jill Kimmelman.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Great. I am a longtime resident. I've been here for all the floods of the last 26 years. And I also grew up here, so I actually saw the footer building. It's footer, not futter, but just letting you know. I saw the footer building go underwater in the 60s. And I'm not saying that other than to say it's important to really know what feet on the ground have seen. I appreciated that somebody asked for more of a heads up in the future. I think you guys who live and breathe this may not understand that we don't understand. If they tell us 8 inches of rain are coming, we're not aware that that's a 50-year flood or a 100-year flood. So that'll be good information for us in the future. I only started flooding after living here for several years. There are many trees that have come down in our neighborhood. Trees, old growth trees, drink thousands of gallons of water. That means the water isn't in the ground, it's in the tree, right? So my question is going to be compounding what the other people are saying and more of a comment to share, because I think you guys need all the information you can get. I'm constantly pumping water at this point. There's the groundwater in the South Mountain neighborhood. I can understand why it was flooded for so many hours for the other gentleman, because the groundwater here is at such a high level that it doesn't go down for weeks sometimes. I'm still flooded. I mean, I'm still within the groundwater is within 6 inches of my basement right now. That means it's going into my sump. If that is going to be addressed, or if we can put that on the flood committee's ideas to address that, it would be really helpful. I was kind of upset because for whatever reason, they chose to take down all the trees on Whittingham Drive. That's, again, just thousands and thousands of gallons of water that is left in the ground instead of going into trees. And I understand you guys see the whole picture, and I'm only seeing my part. I'm going to add one last thing. I live in a corner of Greenwood. I've called the town for years about this, but honestly, again, making a phone call isn't enough. I'm sure I needed to write this to you and write to the county or the state. There is no drainage on my side of the street. There's no drainage for at least 20 houses. On the other side of the street in the same area, there are 3 drain pipes. They don't affect our side because the water doesn't, because of the slope of the road. It's very important that we get some drainage over here. And I heard you mentioning it, but I hope that's not a 5-year project. I hope that's a 6-month project. While they were tearing up the roads for PSNG, honestly, I was like, oh gosh, can't they just put in the drainage now? I mean, I'm gonna just put it out there. We're tearing up the place. Why can't we do some of this? If we can possibly find the economic wherewithal, I think it saves us money in the long run.
Joe, do you have a number, or what?
My house number is, I'm sorry, my house number?
Yep.
128 Greenwood Drive.
Yep. Okay.
And my side of Greenwood, there's, as I said, there is no drainage for a very long thing, and all of us are experiencing water in much lesser events because it's, oh, I am sorry. I do have one last thing that I want to ask as a real question, not just proposal. Is the Gilbert Avenue pumps, are they being used during these dry periods to get this water out of here, out of our waterlogged neighborhood?
John can discuss the engineering of it and when it does kick on.
Yeah, it does kick on after the river subsides. It does not run when the river is breached, because it just cycles the water, and it's pointless, and it can actually damage the pumps. But they do kick on after the river succeeds, so they should be running.
Oh, okay, good. So they should be helping to empty some of this
Absolutely.
high water level.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Then I just will invite you guys to measure it, because the water level is as high as I've ever seen it. As you can come to my house, I invite you. I will make sure to buy some fresh coffee and all. But I'd love you to see what the water levels are. Yeah. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah, and I'm just going to touch on something that I had heard post storm regarding the Gilbert Place pump station. That pump station was running and does run, but it runs at certain times based on it's the engineering of it. But it was not shut off or not functioning. Remember, during this storm, we thankfully also maintained power, which was not the case back during Irene, when the community lost power in addition to the flooding event. And so that pump does continue to run. All right, Michael Rooney. You there, Michael? All right, we'll come back to you, Michael. And Chen?
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hello. Oh, hi. Yes, my name is An, living 22 Mountain View Road. I have a few quick questions. One is that I understand the water overflowed the bank that night, but I also noticed that on the street level, the storm drain doesn't seem to be working maybe around 11 p.m. that night. So was there a block in the, maybe I missed this, in the sewage system that night in Millburn, or is that something that we can prevent, or there's nothing we could do due to the amount of water?
Well, the storm systems do ultimately drain to the river, and if the river elevation is high, then it makes the local ineffective, because it's the backwater effects from the river. So as the river does raise, the local storm sewer system does become less effective.
But and also
And then
keep
another thing I think was mentioned is that I'm sorry.
no, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, another thing is you know, it was mentioned somewhere that you know, fire department came out to help you know, allow people to drain the water the second day, but they didn't actually come to us until another day after. So like the third day after it happened. So I was wondering, like, you know, is it due to like the shortage of the pump or the manpower of the fire station, or, you know, in the event it happens again, like, you know, we heard other neighbors that had water until, you know, 11 p.m. the other day. That means like nobody came out to help them to drain that water to somewhere else, right? Is that something that can be improved going forward?
Well, you know, one of the things is, you're right. I mean, there's only a certain amount of pumps, and there's only a certain amount of people to run those pumps. You know, and so you know, without having you know, and every community is dealing with their own situation, so it's not as if you can get assistance from neighboring communities for those efforts as well, because everybody around us was dealing with the similar situation. So the fire department, you know, they work their butts off getting around to as many homes as quickly as possible. And so, you know, it is something that you know, is important post-storm, but also it's one of those things, to Dan Devani's point, if you're looking at something that a community can or a resident can take on, is that if you are prone to flooding, or if you've experienced flooding now, you know, perhaps a pump is something you want to consider. You know, to help out, you know, post-storm, if the fire department can't get there quick enough. Okay.
Thank you. Last question is that you know, this is, you know, 100-year flood, right, which has happened 3 times in the last 30 years. So is there, I understand a lot of regulation is based on this exact definition, is because, you know, we couldn't prepare for, or there's no plan to prepare for, you know, 100-year storm. Is there any chance that you think on some government level that we are going to reevaluate the definition of 100-year storm, or reevaluate the current flood zone of Millburn Town?
Yeah, the existing FEMA maps are based on, I believe, 1970 analysis, so they are well overdue to upgrade the hydraulic analysis along the river. But the National Weather Service does periodically increase those rainfall totals, and so I would suspect, yes, they probably will be revising those numbers again.
If they do, does that mean that there will be like more systematic changes or projects?
Well, unfortunately, you design a system based on, you know, the practical storm event, and so you do focus on, you know, for flood mitigation, looking at a 100-year storm. But usually it dictates. Usually the regulatory requirements dictate what you can do. You know, they are very restrictive, that you cannot, you know, impact downstream or upstream. So it does, you know, somewhat restrict what you can do regarding if you're looking at flood walls or pump stations or other forms of flood mitigation. So that usually becomes a challenge, not necessarily the precipitation. So you try to balance what you can do.
Okay,
Right.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. All right. Paolo?
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. I'm on 88 Locust Avenue, and we moved to Millburn about a year ago, and we had no idea about the history of flooding. And now we know, but I guess it's too late. So I just wanted to second what the first gentleman said about the warnings. When we got the warning on our cell phones, I believe it was about around 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. That was literally right at the time or just before we started getting water inside our house. So we had no warning. We lost everything we had in our basement. So we had 8 feet of water in our backyard, right? So our basement flooded to the ceiling, and we had another foot of water on our main floor. So we lost 2/3 of our house. We didn't have flood insurance. We didn't have coverage on the homeowner's insurance. We got $0 from them. And the restoration cost will be over $100,000, right? So if we had any advance warning, we would at least be able to save a lot of our stuff. We had no time at all. So we lost literally everything we had. We had no time to save anything. So definitely improving the warning system in the future would greatly benefit us. The second point I would like to make is about our region here on Locust. As John said, it's well known that this area floods, and it's one of the lowest points in the area, in the city. One of the previous owners of our house did put some sump pumps in the backyard in our house. They used to flood all the time in any flood with any rain. Since they put those sump pumps there, it improved dramatically the situation. In the year that we've been here, we had hard rains, heavy rains, and never had any flooding whatsoever. We just wanted to ask you if there is any solution to our area here, which seems to be the lowest area in the city, that would not have to involve the Army Corps or something that would be cheaper, or something that could be done quicker, at least to address our area, because I understand many people around the city, they had water in their basements, right? So they had major damage. Of course, it's a very significant damage, but we had 8 feet of water, right? That is the amount of damage was, I mean, it's just amazing. And there's nothing we can do about it. I don't know if there's any way to, I don't know, if we can dig our backyards, do something, or have like huge sump pumps to push the water out farther away. I don't know. There's just some solution to the lowest area of the city that might be at least a cheaper and quicker solution to this. And third, my final point is not related to the flood itself. Is about garbage collection, garbage pickup. We have been restoring our house since September 1st. We have contractors here. We have been removing everything. We lost all our flooring, we lost all our walls, we lost everything, all our basement, our kitchen, cabinets, everything. And just this week, when our contractors were taking the trash out, the city said they were no longer able to do that because the city would no longer pick up the trash, the debris from the restoration. So this is, I want to take this opportunity to ask the city to come back and help us remove the debris, because we still have a lot of work to do. This will take still several weeks to be done. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, pal. I think just to touch on Paolo's point about Ridgewood Road and that area, as well as again, I mentioned these 3 areas: Ridgewood Road, Locust, Greenwood. These are all areas that have been examined and need to continue to be examined, but there are constraints, private property and other constraints with the ability to gather easement, even to have a pump in those locations. But it's something that can continue to be looked at. Things do change over the years, but these areas have been looked at and have been faced with some constraint that didn't allow any project to go forward. But we're certainly happy to continue those conversations and look at those things. Thomas, Chase.
Hey, thanks, guys. Yeah, Thomas Chase of 6 Clinton Place. Thanks a lot for doing this tonight. It's very informative, hearing a lot of interesting information. How much of the damage caused in Millburn is Western Rahway River versus Eastern Rahway River? Can that be divided up? Seems like we're mostly Western. Is that right?
No, I would say the East Branch, that's when we're talking about Locust and Greenwood, they can get hit with in both directions, but it's contributing to both rivers.
Yeah, no, I know both contribute. Do we have any idea if we can allocate one versus the other? Like if we were able to solve the Western Branch, would that cure downtown, or is Eastern Branch still a threat to downtown?
Well, like for example, the Army Corps, what they're trying to do it's focusing on reducing the flow in the West Branch, but what that does is once you reduce the flow in the West Branch, the East Branch will have less restriction in that conveyance between when the two rivers join. So there would definitely be benefits to the East Branch also.
Okay. Yeah, simple, like maybe like a technical question. Do we have a number of excess, whether it's, what's the measure, cubic square feet or gallons or barrels of water that we have to deal with? That in that, both of these storms, Irene and Ida, are like a 24-hour event, and most of the damage happened within like 5 hours probably. What amount of water in those couple hours is excess our capacity? Do we know?
Alex, if you can just put my video back on, it came off. I can't tell you off the top of my head, but we have models of both the West and the East Branch, and we can calculate that. I just don't know off the top of my head. Okay,
gotcha. All right, final question. Like the area, it seems like, to just a novice, that it is an obvious a choke point is the Western Branch of the Rahway River, which runs through the reservation, so people can sort of visualize it. That's along Brookside Drive. Brookside Drive is the avenue that goes out if you cross Glen Avenue and runs through the reservation. That's the Western Branch. That runs in town right above Glen Avenue, goes over there's a little waterfall there. And right at that point, it's a very narrow valley or almost channel that's probably 200 feet wide, that if there was a berm put in there that was a 10 or 15 foot berm that went over to Brookside Drive and had a dam that you could close in there, I think it's like about 200 feet if you walk around there. If you could close that, you could make a pond during these 24-hour events of torrential rain that would back up into the lower South Mountain Reservation and prevent quite a bit of water from coming into downtown. Is that part of the plans that you discussed with vis-a-vis the part of the plans that have been considered? Doing something there?
We can certainly look at that. I know the area that you're talking about. In order to obtain meaningful flood mitigation to attenuate the flow, it has to be a very large area. And certainly you can even look at Diamond Mill Pond and Camel's Mill Pond and utilizing those areas to a degree too, but you just need such a large volume to have meaningful flood mitigation. But certainly we can look at it.
Because you have the whole part of the southern reservation to basically, you could turn that into a lake for 24 hours, 48 hours. Now, I mean, the upper part has the reservoir in it, but the lower part just has a trickle of a stream for 364 days a year. If there was a way to let that trickle of a stream that usually exists go through a narrow channel that you could then close when there's a storm coming and just alleviate half of the water that floods downtown, that would be something. Do you know if that's part of the Army Corps of Engineers plans? Did they look at
it's not, they didn't look in that particular area, but we could certainly look at that. I'm not dismissing it. I could certainly look at that.
Well, are you playing a role in what's looked at or not?
Yeah,
Or you
yeah,
look-
I mean, I consult with the mayor's council and we make suggestions on what the Army Corps to look at.
Oh, okay,
But-
yeah, that seems
but
like an
it's like-
obvious place to look. I mean, right there is very narrow. I mean, build that up. You could do it back in the reservation, and you could be relatively concealed. It wouldn't be. It would.
Yeah, again, it just comes to volume. It has to be the volume that we're trying to mitigate. It's just very large, and so I can see that being of some magnitude, but is it going to be enough? You would have to look at it.
Right. That relates to my second question of how much magnitude are we dealing with? How much square feet or cubic feet of water do we have to deal with?
It's the size of an area and depth of the Orange Reservoir. So if you really look at that on a map, you can appreciate, the size of that they're lowering that by 15 feet. And so it's a very substantial volume that's being mitigated.
Was that lowered at all before Ida?
Thomas, I don't mean to be rude, but we've got 20 other people that have their hand raised. I just don't want to get into this back and forth. We're happy to answer any of your continued questions. But I know you and John could probably talk for hours tonight. So I just want to make sure.
All right, last question. Was the South Mountain Reservoir lowered before Ida? Were they able to do it at all?
The county does lower the reservoir normally during major storm events, and I don't know how far they lowered it, but they typically do operate it. So you get some attenuation, but because the pipe is so small, it just doesn't drain fast enough.
All right, thanks.
Thanks, Tom. Shannon?
Yes.
Hi, thanks. Actually, Josh Ferreira, Shannon's husband. So thanks again for doing this. I guess my comment and question is going to be very much along the same lines as some of my friends and neighbors. But I live at 848 Ridgewood Road, and I think most people know that the water issues in that spot are chronic and problematic. And I just want to give my endorsement to a solution which results in the city, the town, coming in and maintaining, the drainage pipes basically in my backyard, right? And so I know it's been pursued before, and there maybe was some resistance. You mentioned earlier that there are private residences and people need to sign up to an easement. I think now's the time to bring that conversation back up, and I would love to participate and with you and help go door to door, getting people to sign up to that, because I think that significantly can mitigate the 9 feet of water that we all had in our backyards. That's not something that should happen. And again, you shouldn't have something like that sitting in your yard for 24 hours and needing the fire department to come and pump it out. I think that's a separate issue beyond the overall town, flood mitigation plan, which I think we should kind of come together right now while this is fresh in our minds and just solve this. And then my question, so that's a comment. My question is on my front yard. What I found most surprising about this was the fact that the sewers and the storm drains were backed up right in front of my house, right? And this was early on. This was probably, some 9:30 p.m. where the water was not going in, but it was coming out. It seems surprising to me that was happening at that particular spot, and I was wondering if that's been looked at. I guess it's because it couldn't make it all the way through to the raw way because there was already some flooding occurring there. But it seemed to me there might be something else going on there as to why the water was stopping in that specific spot and why it wouldn't have been moving and spreading out, other spots in the neighborhood.
Okay. There's nothing that we are aware of or made aware of, but I think your assumption is probably closer to the reality, is that there was an inability to get to the river. But it is something that, as we continue to hear this conversation, and we continue to hear from residents in the area, and we, the looking at the various pipes down there, whether it's TVing them, making sure that there's no obstruction, or post-storm, no obstruction as a result of the storm, will be beneficial. But, you know, as we're just kind of, you know, getting out of this as well ourselves. And so now is the time for us to start looking at those sort of post-storm activities like TVing lines and making sure everything's copacetic.
I really appreciate that. Anything I can do to help, please let me know.
Thank you, Josh. Appreciate it. All right. Just if you've already asked a question or spoken, if you don't mind lowering your hand so that we know we're going to try to get to everybody once here. So if you could just lower your hand if you've already spoken, appreciate that. All right. Susan Priori. You there, Susan? All right, Susan, we will come back to you. Kimberly.
Do you have her on mute? Okay.
Hi.
Hi,
Hello.
yeah, this is Mohammed and my wife Kimberly. I guess it's more of an observation and kind of a question connected to it. But one of the things that we noticed first was that the sewer system was backing up out of the underground sewer network. And I guess my question is, where did all that excess water come from? If the sewer is like connected to people's homes, is it also open to the rain? And like, why wasn't that discharged? And I understand that the river manages the storm drain system and the runoff from that, but the sewer system itself was also backing up into the street and then mixing and then going everywhere. And like, how is that system managed separately? Was there issues with like flow there? Yeah.
Yeah, that's the investigation that the township is doing on the infiltration and inflow. And typically you can have surcharges because of elevated groundwater that's coming in through cracks in the pipe, or it could be surface water running into the manholes themselves. So you know that is something that the town is investigating and is looking to try to mitigate any major cracks or deficiencies in the sewer system. You know, the one low-lying areas, it's not uncommon for to install backflow preventers. I do work in Cranford also, and a lot of the towns, a lot of the residents there, they actually have backflow preventers on their sewer system. So you can, you know, coordinate. If you are interested in something like that, you can talk to the township, the plumbing inspector, and see, you know, get advice. So yeah, and I think you know, Mohammed, that is also something that, you know, we're taking a look at, but it is part of that is also, you know, the South Mountain area is generally the last point when it comes to the stormwater conveyance as well as the sewer system conveyance across the Rawway and on its way down to Elizabeth. So, you know, whatever may have also occurred uphill or upstream is also, you know, kind of comes to a point in South Mountain as well. But it is definitely something that needs to be looked at, and so we appreciate that comment.
I would like to say something too. This is Kim. It's surprising to me to hear from all these other folks on this call that so many other people have also called the township to you know, note that they've had issues with water in their yard or, you know, in the sewer that's in front of their house or whatever, and nothing has been done about it. I mean, I know for us, we have called several times about, you know, issues with drainage around our house, and to hear that other neighbors nearby have also, and, you know, this issue hasn't been looked into further to make some sort of solution to this is pretty disappointing.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that frustration, but also, as I had stated, there were solutions brought forward, and for various reasons they weren't able to move forward. But you know, we are here to listen, and we're here to, you know, take on other potential projects, and so That's why we're having this meeting and wanting to hear from everybody. But also, there are drainage issues in a lot of locations and a lot of private property that is not necessarily, something that we are going to be able to solve for. We need to solve for the system. And so, and I appreciate the comments tonight about the system, and certainly I know Martha is on the line listening as well, and it's something that we will continue to investigate.
Okay, I mean, I guess the system is supposed to serve for the township, right, and its residents. And, you have lots and lots of residents with, a lot of damage to their houses. So obviously the system is not working. And also I would like to propose that, those projects that you're talking about, Alex, that residents said no to in the past, I think you should bring them up again, because after going through this, I think a lot of people will change their mind or whatever. And I'd also like to add that we do have an easement at our house, and it did not seem to help at all.
I'm not familiar with what type of easement that is, but agreed on your first comment, Kim. And now is the time to really approach those projects.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Chumpo?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, hi, this is Chumpo Yang at 850 Ridgewood Road. Thank you for the informative presentation. I have two questions for you. So I would like to know what our township could have done just the night or just 1 or 2 days before the hurricane to mitigate the incident. If not, if it cannot be prevented. For example, to drain the water from the reservoir in Orange Reservation, or drain the water from the Tidal Park, or maybe send somebody to clean the sewage pipe. As many people mentioned, the sewage backflow at the nighttime, something might get clogged in the sewer pipe. That's my first question. And then my second question for you is, John mentioned about some alternative solutions, including new reservoir, new dam, or to replace 20-inch pipe with 36-inch pipe. So will any of those solutions be implemented within the next 5 years, or they are just still in the preliminary assessment stage?
Yeah, the work from the Army Corps is all in preliminary stages, and they've came up with a number of alternatives that would work. However, the BCR ratio was less than 1. So, there are other solutions out there, but we're trying to find a solution that meets all their criterias, and certainly, they are coming back to the table. They are restudying the river, and so hopefully, within a reasonable time frame, a regional solution is going to be identified and implemented by the Army Corps. You did mention other things with the local. I know, again, the sanitary sewer was mentioned again, and the township has taken steps to start to investigate and identify where leakage is happening and how to mitigate some of the I&I that's happening in the system. So that is an active program, and they are looking at doing that.
Thank you. Sarah Sherman.
Thank you. Sarah Sherman, 42 Greenwood Drive, also speaking for the South Mountain Civic Association. In the 10 plus years that I have been part of a group advocating for flood mitigation along the Rahway River, I have to say that I have come to see the Army Corps of Engineers as an obstacle and a hindrance, and definitely not a help. They are interested in risk, and we are interested in solutions. So I'm not given to optimism on the subject, and I know a great many people are suffering and recovering from what we just experienced. But I think it's important to note that the New Jersey DEP is now the non-federal co-sponsor of the Flood Resiliency and Protection Plan, if it comes to pass. And I would also say that We have federal support, we have state support, and clearly we have local support. In the 28 plus years that I have lived here, I have to say that I think it's a great idea that you finally have on the table some ideas that I didn't think I would see. I learned about the term Blue Acres the week after Ida. I did not know about it previously. I think it's important that that should be considered. I think work on the downtown culvert is something that we need to consider locally. As to the reservation, I think that Campbell's Mill Pond is probably in need of some repair. Now, the township of Millburn does not control that. But I think that anything that municipalities can do together to maybe agree on, you know, how do we help the city of Orange get some funding for refurbishing Campbell's Mill Pond, because we're all going to benefit in some way further down the line. This is a regional problem. It's not just Millburn's problem. So I'm glad to see that all of these issues are on the table. I want to thank you for holding this discussion. I think it's really important. So thank you to the mayor and to Mr. McDonald and John Rushke, who I've heard many, many times. I think you articulated very well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Jean Pasternak.
Yes, hi, thank you so much. I live on 342 Hobart, so this part of town was not impacted this time. I've been here long enough, though, to have gone through 4 different storms, and I see the damage that it's done. And this time, I have to say, it seems very extensive, especially on residents as well as businesses. My question is really for John, does it make sense for individual towns to go ahead and spend a lot of money on repairing, say, our downtown, where it's inevitable, really, that this is going to recur unless these bigger projects do get done? It seems like we keep redoing the same things over and over in our homes and our businesses, and yet we sustain these major losses over and over. So what do other towns do? What do other places around the country do? What makes sense economically?
Yeah, and unfortunately, we're in a situation that what we've experienced with these tropical storms is not your normal patterns. You know, when I talk about the 100-year storm event, you know, that's a storm that forms within this region. And so, you know, then you can appreciate that, you know, we really haven't had a storm that formulated within this region and not from the tropics and dumped 8 inches of water. So that's, you know, when you're designing for a 100-year storm based on those theoretical, it's reasonable that you have to rebuild after a 100-year storm, because you shouldn't theoretically get another 100-year storm. But, you know, that's one thing that, you know, I want to push with the Army Corps is that, you know, we are in different, you know, times where we do have, you know, weather patterns are changing. We are, you know, very susceptible to tropical storms. And so, you know, we have to start planning for the future and looking at climate change, looking at, you know, those scenarios. And so I think you know, for long-term planning, we have to, you know, expand what, you know, not on what we have to evaluate. But unfortunately, you know, you certainly need to recover and move forward, because you can't, you know, it's just impractical just not to do nothing and just wait. You know, you do have to do what you can, do what's practical, and move forward.
Is it possible, though, to look at also even the medium term, relocating, you know, the center of town, for example, or relocating where the majority of the business is? I guess that's kind of what I'm thinking about, that there can be long-term and medium-term kinds of solutions. So I hear your point. Can I ask another one? You mentioned Cranford. I happened to see like what the Cranford mayor put out. it seems like she very actively sought the residents get involved in the actual lobbying efforts on a bigger scale. Is that something that you would suggest a township do? I mean, we have not really heard much from our local governing body about flood mitigation, at least in the last 5 years that I can recall. Would you say that that's something that should actively happen with the township, get residents really behind all this?
Oh, absolutely, it does help. The pressure on the elected officials to apply funding, apply pressure. Because the state, they did was the non-federal contributor towards the past project, and the state spent quite a bit of money, towards the initial study, and they're committed to provide more state funds towards the study. So and it was from the pressure, not necessarily of the residents, but of the elected officials of Millburn, of Cranford, of other municipalities. And it wasn't just the residents, but the elected officials have put pressure. But to get more from residents, that certainly is helpful.
I just have two more really quick ones. As far as residential properties, my understanding is that the local realtors do not have to disclose when they're selling a property. If the owner does disclose it, fine, but they're not compelled to disclose previous flooding incidences. Can that be worked on at some level so that people are aware prior to purchasing a property what they're getting themselves into?
Gene, I think that's probably more of a question
for
your
town
state
attorney.
legislature.
Okay, and then the last thing I want to know, maybe from Alex, we do have zoning ordinances. I'm just wondering, are you thinking about, or is that the job of this committee? I don't know who it is, but there are certain things that are already in place that weren't enforced, but there also could be new ones that would be preventive in terms of zoning ordinance information. Is there anything that you're thinking about or that you could share with us?
Well, I think first and foremost is that, Millburn does have a steep slope ordinance. It does have, a stormwater management ordinance. These are all zoning ordinances that help, sort of mitigate, issues when it comes to flooding and to building and things like that. I think it's also safe to say that any new construction that would probably go into those areas of South Mountain would have a component of a basic flood elevation. But those homes are, most of those homes are older and have been built or had been built prior to zoning code, and that neighborhood was established back in the 1940s and 50s. So yes, to answer your question, Gene, there are zoning codes that are already working toward that, but also, certainly can continue to discuss if there are more serious codes that can be put into effect that will help future building in flood prone areas.
Good. Okay. Well, I hope our local governing body will make this a high priority over things like the visions and chicken coops. Thank you.
Donna.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, hi. This is Donna Olliger, 28 Greenwood Drive, and my husband has a couple of great ideas.
Well, I have a couple of questions. I want to go back to something somebody mentioned before. We have two ponds here, Diamond Mill Pond and Campbell's Pond. All right, and both of those ponds, even though they're not of great volume, I think would be big enough if they were dredged out to hold some of the water that comes downstream from the Orange Reservoir. Now, a couple of years back, the dam on Diamond Mill Pond was reconstructed. And when they rebuilt that dam, they emptied out the pond. And the pond seems to be only about 5 or 6 feet deep. I don't know how much of a problem it would be in there, but seeing that both areas are right next to the road, I don't think dredging it out would be a big problem. Has that been considered or studied?
Yes, it has. Looking at both those ponds, they looked at different scenarios. One was suggested to try to utilize the existing ponds and create the volume that's necessary and try to minimize the amount of impact to the reservation. But the cost benefit ratio was significantly less than 1, because when they're reconstructing a dam, they're reconstructing the Army Corps standards, and so that raised the price. So that was looked at as trying to utilize those existing ponds and try to minimize the impact to the reservation. The dam that was like I said, was a marginal BCR was a 50-foot dam, and that was a new dam that they were going to construct.
Okay, now, my other question, you have to forgive my ignorance on this. Diamond Mill Pond is used by sportsmen. It's stocked by the New Jersey Department of Fish and Game every year, so that recreational fishermen can use it. Now, is there a chance that a Green Acres project could be involved in this?
Green Acres is involved if we're doing any work around the reservation, and we have to comply with their regulations. So they are involved in it. I'm not sure the pot of money that would come from the state would come from their dam safety flood program, not necessarily Green Acres.
Okay, and my last thought is, could we petition the county executive rather than putting money into the Turtleback Zoo to divert some of that money to a project like this?
Okay.
Ah.
That's I'll kick that question to Alex.
Yeah, no, I think there are always conversations to be had with all levels of government, and certainly the county is one of them, and they have some control over some of these items, but it's still going to come down to efforts and mitigation efforts from the local municipality with the assistance of the county where necessary. So I think there's always value in letting your public officials know how you feel. So,
right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just wanted to touch on a few things real quick. One is we're currently at 8:50. We're gonna continue this until 9:15. I do want to mention that going back to John's point about the Army Corps project and the bypass solution, that right now we have a consensus plan that includes both Union County and Essex County, in which the county executive has supported, as well as Orange, who own the reservoir. So it is a favorable plan. The point now is whether the Army Corps truly jumps on board and is willing to move forward with funding the project. Another item is that it was mentioned earlier that the pond should be lowered prior to storms, and I want to just make it clear again that our prevention and preparation for storms is that we do lower the pond. We have a bypass of that pond, and we lower that prior to storms as well. So, and again, we are probably not going to get through everybody in the next 25 minutes. I'm hopeful we do, but remember that that you can always email us at letusknow@millburntwp.org if you have a comment or a question or a suggestion. We're always willing to take those. I'm still trying to answer the Q&A as well, but if we don't get to those, we'll be sure to attempt to answer those as well through frequently asked questions. I'll just ask one more time, if you've already spoken, please lower your hand so that we know who hasn't spoken yet, and that we can make sure we might be able to get to everybody prior to the end at 9:15. Thank you. Sean.
Hi, this is Sean's wife. My name is Deborah. We live in Rector Street. I understand there's a lot of flooding issues in South Mountain areas, but I just want to make you aware that actually on Rector Street, especially for neighbors that are closer to the river, we got severely damaged too, including the church as well as the daycare. The daycare couldn't even open for 2 weeks because, all the restoration going on. We ourselves are closer to the river, and we got like 7 feet of water as well. So I just want to make you aware, so you know that actually on this area we also need some focus as well. So I wonder any project or mitigations that are ongoing, we'll also consider our area, our street.
Yeah. So I think, you know, and I appreciate that comment because, you know, we do talk a lot about downtown and South Mountain, but we are aware that what we call the Washington section or Rector Street in that area are prone to flooding once the Taylor Park Pond does fill up. But also the Glenwood section is another section of town that does experience some flooding with the diversion works as well as Meadowbrook behind. And so there are other areas that, you know, and there are one-offs throughout the township too that experience flooding. The township has many stormwater conveyances such as Taylor Brook, Lawrence Drive, Sylvan Way. All these have small brooks beyond Canoe Brook that flows down the hill across toward JFK. But we are aware and appreciate that comment and bringing that awareness and attention to the rest of the group. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, I just have one last question. In terms of this like Army Corps projects, just wonder what is the timeline expected, or will that rather than discuss updates on ongoing, ongoing basis as well?
John, do you have a timeline? I'm not sure I caught the whole question, but
a timeline on the Army Corps or a timeline on the township actions?
I guess it's more like a timeline in general for the mitigations.
Yeah, the Army Corps process, you know, the Army Corps, you know, I can compliment, they can move mountains, but they'll move it at a very slow pace. And so it will be years before actually they actually go through the whole process and come up with a design and implement it. So for a regional implementation through the Army Corps, it will be years. Locally, it will be, you know, the township is going to step back and look at all the issues, and they are forming a committee, and that committee is going to be discussing, you know, all these issues. And so, you know, I would expect that there'll be, you know, quicker action for sure on the township side.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Spiro?
Yes, hello. Good evening, everyone. John, Alex, thank you for all the information. I'm an engineer also, so all the information was great, and I feel sorry for all the residents that went through this terrible ordeal. My question is, climate change is real, and we will see a lot of these storms more frequently in the future. Have we or have you taken that into consideration for any future studies?
Well, I certainly take into consideration as we look at, you know, implementing a capital project that we're expecting to, you know, get a long-term, you know, effectiveness out of it. But it is something that, you know, I do want to press upon the Army Corps, because when they're looking at the cost-benefit ratios, you know, when they're looking at the events of a 100-year storm, that, you know, their projections is that it's only going to happen once every, you know, 100 years, where in fact it's already happened 3 times.
Right.
Here. So, you know, I think they need to step back and you know, it is hard to change the Army Corps' policies, because they do look at, you know, they apply their policies, you know, nationally. And so they apply it to every state equally. So sometimes it's hard to get them to go outside the box. But, you know, in this case, you know, I agree. They do need to start looking at climate change and how the benefits of implementing, you know, real flood mitigation on the Rollaway River is beneficial, not from a 100-year storm, but if we're looking at these tropical storms is what we need to focus on.
Well, thank you, everyone. Appreciate your this meeting.
Thank you, Spiro. Melinda Culp.
Hi there, can everybody hear us?
Yes.
Great. This is Dennis Culp, Melinda's husband. I'm here with Melinda. We live on 226 Glen Avenue. And just sort of an observation, having been here for, you know, these last 2 storms, the gentleman described it correctly. The west branch of the Rollaway River, once it starts coming over the bridge on Glen Avenue, it starts coming down Glen Avenue, and I can almost predict, like, in an hour later, downtown's going to flood. That seems to be the 1-2 punch. So I wanted to give an observation and maybe an idea as a suggestion for the town. The low point of Glen Avenue is right next to our house. Actually, it's between our house and there's the lacrosse field right there. And so that actually used to be a pond prior to 1955. So that's the natural place where the water would settle. So it's obviously been filled in with a field. And there's a brook that comes from Locust Grove that actually goes under that field through a pipe. So currently this is the high point because it was backfilled and there's a field, but there's a piece of land in between 218 Glen Avenue and 226 Glen Avenue, which is our house, that could potentially be used as a place where water could be held up. And granted, this isn't the kind of volume that is going to mitigate the issue at large, but maybe it would set it back 15 minutes, 20 minutes, maybe downtown would be saved from flooding. If they were to use that piece of land as potentially a place where plantings could absorb water, it could be made into a holding pond that could, would normally be open, but when in a flood situation, they could close it off and it could hold, maybe 2,000 gallons of water or something like that. So I just wanted to throw it out there that it's a resource that the town has. It's a piece of land that the town owns, and it could be used to mitigate flooding on a small level like this. And, maybe not something as expensive and arduous as getting the Corps of Engineers involved. So we just wanted to throw that out.
Yeah, we just want to thank you guys for presenting all this tonight. And just because a lot of residents don't even know that there used to be a pond there. There used to be a place where the water went. So naturally it goes that direction because Glen Avenue curves from where to go underneath towards the train bridge. And so when the waters rise, it tends to take a left and go straight down Glen Avenue and then go straight across the library field. I mean, we were out there during the storm and it was a foot high there. So anything the town can do to plant more trees, to make it a rain garden, to add something to absorb the water would help not only the residences here that their backyards used to have a place to drain and they don't now that the library field is there and built up so much. So it would really help the residents a lot from the continual flooding that happens. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you for feedback.
Thanks for the observations. And Dennis, if you have any video of what occurred out there, again, we're asking anybody that has some video of flooding from that evening. If you could email it to let us know at millburntwp.org. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I have a video of how it was coming down Glen Avenue. I can send that.
Yeah.
Great.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. When?
Hi, this is Hua. Hi, John. I heard the awesome presentation. So I have one of the questions that I think. By the way, I'm from 842 Ridgewood Road. My house has been flooded, both the basement and the first floor. So I think as the previous the folks who also asked a question, a lot of the neighborhood get being hit big, so especially financially, right? So is there anything the town also would consider to help the folks that get flooded badly, like the property tax or other means of help the people in this neighborhood relieve some of the financial burdens in a town's perspective? Thank you.
Thank you. Just to touch on that, we've been asked this over the last several weeks. There's little in terms of direct financial or tax abatement or anything like that. Residents can on the tax assessor's page fill out an assessment request for 2022. I know that's not really of any consolation as you're going through this now, but it is something that you can fill out and ask for a reassessment or a look at your assessment in 2022. However, our avenue is through these public infrastructure projects. to assist and to sort of move forward with any mitigation efforts that are possible. But again, we have been asked that, and unfortunately, it's not so simple in terms of direct assistance. Kerry Heller.
Hi, good evening. I grew up in the South Mountain area some 50 years ago on the corner of Locust and Mountain View. Newspapers to pretty much every house on Ridgewood and Locust. Flooding is now worse than it was then, but it is always flooded. To the person at 819 Ridgewood, I know the house very well. That backyard has always been underwater. This storm, I also own commercial property now, some 50 years later, in Maplewood, known as the Map Building, further north than that, and then further north into the Orange Valley and West Orange. In those areas, we saw 3 to 4 feet more of water height elevation along the stream, particularly in Maplewood. And we have camera view. When Floyd occurred, and I bought the building just after then, the water came up to a corner of the building on the property. This time it came up about 4 feet up on the building. Parking lots did flood, didn't come up to our flood elevation, first floor, very fortunately, but the amount of water coming from the north, and we'll talk about the West Branch in a moment, but the valley of West Orange, all the way to Ashland Avenue behind the Edison complex, they saw water in those areas that they've never seen for those who've been around for 50 plus years. So this was and John, I'll leave this for you if you want to explain now at a later date, but the amount of water that came down in a short period of time that didn't get through and into the channels, under the bridges and through the woods and so to speak, it was an enormous rush of water that I'll now talk about downtown being there through the storm, through the center of the storm, the middle of the storm at 8 o'clock, how fast the water came. And I'm sure South Mountain and other places saw the same thing, that the water came up faster than my 100 sandbags in the downtown. Alex, as you know, we certainly were, many of us either at the meeting at Township Committee or, listening in, and the calls were coming in a, very fast fashion, both from, I'm sure, municipal people as well as from, tenants and other people. And we rushed as quickly as we could. And it happened so fast. If I then could take it to a question, you issued a report at the request of the Township Committee in 2020, a report, the hydraulic study of the, I guess really, was it really the West Branch, or was it more of a holistic? I think it was.
No, we focused just on the West Branch, just the downtown was the focus.
Right, and you issued a report, and it was presented to the Township Committee. You had 4, and I'm looking at it now, and some alternatives and some that you didn't think were terrific, great, and it sort of died there. I guess you presented the report, if I recall, in August of 2020, and it went to the Township Committee, and not faulting anyone by any means, but there was something out there to have further discussion on, and it's now taken obviously this particular storm to further that conversation. On that point, I'm asking on behalf of other commercial property owners downtown who I think are on the call now, who didn't even know about the meeting tonight. I'm not sure how word was supposed to get out to those who aren't checking the town website, but just a question, and spoken with some other engineers today and over the last couple of weeks. If there were no obstructions coming into downtown Millburn for the moment, thinking about the West Branch collectively as water that also meets the East Branch and backwashes and causes the East Branch to back up as well. If there was not the damming effect on Essex Street or on this building that comes over the stream or Millburn Avenue Bridge, and I'll just have one more short question on that after. If the water got through the town faster, would we still see the same breaching of the walls of the channel?
Yes, if you can push the water faster through town, if you increase the velocity, you need less cross-sectional area to convey the same amount of flow. So yes, that is a technique of trying to for flood mitigation. You reduce the flood elevations if you can increase the velocities. You just have to. The concern is what's the downstream impact, and that's always the challenge. But absolutely, that's a technique to look at.
Well, on that, we don't necessarily Army Corps permission. So so to speak, if the county bridges were our bridges, and again, I'll ask something about the Millburn Avenue Bridge in a moment, or that building over the stream, we don't need Army Corps approval to remove things or to raise things.
We don't need Army Corps approval for anything, but we would like to get their money. That's to be frank. It's the Army Corps, the federal funds, they come with millions of dollars, and and that's where we like to tap into the Army Corps or the state to try and get state funds. But that's why it's frustrating to work with the Army Corps because they're moving so slow. But there's a substantial amount of funds that come with the Army Corps.
On the Millburn Avenue Bridge, either Alex or John, what year did the county redo the bridge?
It was recent, wasn't it, Alex? It was within the last 20 years, was it?
Yeah, it was within the last 15. I think it was 2012, actually.
It was
somewhere around there.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, time flies.
John, for those who want to go and find Alex, I think the report that John issued, I think is on the town's webpage. John, but the modeling that's done, and this is really a question, the county bridge, it was there when you did the report, and your 4 alternatives of things that we could do, did it model leaving the, so to speak, there's 2 arches as we now know.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, we're running out a little bit of time. We can talk about this a lot, but yeah, definitely the Millburn Avenue Bridge is a major factor in restricting flow through the downtown area, and a long-term solution is to look at that bridge and open up that bridge so that it's not such a conveyance of constriction of flow.
I'm fair that Alex, if you would, just with regard to the county, when the county built the bridge, the question is, did they model the bridge, the water flow under the bridge, taking into consideration that the building over the stream was there, that if that building were removed, perhaps the county bridge was designed wrong to not allow the proper flow? And I know that's not a question for John tonight.
Yeah, I can't answer that. I don't know for sure, but typically when they rehabilitate bridge, they're putting the bridge, they're not changing the hydraulics of the bridge. They're usually maintaining it.
That's my point. Thank you.
Liu Wang.
Hi, thanks for the past 2 hours. I like the idea that you projected for the big projects, for the mitigation plan. However, I still think if you can give us some financial aid in the short term, that would be great. I know a lot of people on Ridgewood Road. Oh, by the way, I live on 827 Ridgewood Road. Our house was flooded all the way to the first floor, the basement, ground floor, everything is gone. So the loss can be like to 100,000 US dollar, but we don't have flood insurance. Our home insurance declined our claim. We think we are left alone. And the FEMA, they asked us to connect with SBA first. And it sounds like when I talk to the customer service from FEMA, it sounds like they are not going to give us anything if we can get some loan from SBA. So we think we're left behind, live alone in the disaster. I don't know whether the township have think about maybe the tax relief or some refund on the tax. That will be a quick relief to the people who suffered from disaster. I know it's a hard question, but have you guys ever think about that to make it more feasible for the residents?
Appreciate your question, and I will answer it. We do not. The municipality cannot give direct assistance to residents. Advocating FEMA, speaking to our federal representatives, as well as residents speaking to them, to see where FEMA is in funding and how long that will take, and getting some direct answers, I think is certainly one of the roles that we take on during this time. But direct assistance is not and just has not been, in my experience, something that the local government does for the residential community. So I know it's a difficult question, it's a difficult answer. It's not the answer that people want to hear, but that's what it is at this point in time. So unless there's some avenue that would be opened up in times like these, but this is why FEMA exists, and but we can certainly advocate for direct answers from them. Okay, so
I'm not asking for the help from federal government or the state. I'm asking Millburn Township. Have you ever?
No, I understood your question, and that was what I answered, is that the local government does not offer direct assistance. FEMA is the avenue in times of disaster and recovery that assistance comes through. So that was the answer to the question.
It's not the assistance. I'm asking like tax relief or exempt from the property tax.
Yeah, I've already answered that question too. I'm sorry. I don't mean to be, but I have answered that. There is a form on the tax assessor's page that you can fill out for to have them look at your assessment. However, there's nothing allowable by statute from the township to offer direct tax relief or a forgiveness of taxes or anything like that. We also went through this when COVID hit as well. There was nothing that gave, except for an extension from the governor at one point, there was nothing that gave the municipality the ability to offer tax relief on property taxes. Okay, so we have time for one more question. It is 9:15 now. I do apologize for those that we weren't able to get to, and certainly, again, as I said, we have the ability. This is just the start of the conversation. We are going to get the flood mitigation advisory group up and running, and we also will continue to have this conversation. And potentially more meetings as well from a larger public scale. But really appreciate everybody's comments and inputs, and just hope that if you haven't gotten the chance to speak tonight, that you will email us and let us know, and let us hear your concerns, hear your questions, hear your experience, send us videos, whatever it might be, anything that will assist us in our efforts moving forward as a municipality. And so with that, I'll just call on one more person that has been on here for a while to talk, and that is April. Hold on, talk. April, I'm gonna bring you on as a panelist because you have a older version, so. Are you able to come on, April? That's not working. All right. Okay.
Hi.
Oh, there we go, April.
Hi, thank you. Yes, thank you, John. I'm in line for a long time. If I'm really physically raising my hand would be sore already. Okay, I do have questions. I know this time, it's New Jersey state got to be declared as disaster by the federal government, and then Essex County was added to the FEMA list. So I'm wondering, besides the resident, we can apply for FEMA grant or loan. Does the township get any budget from the FEMA also to help on the flood-related project?
The municipality only gets public assistance through FEMA. Well, let me rephrase that. Initially, following a storm, the township gets public assistance from FEMA to deal with our own damages, such as concrete flume damage, such as the damage that was done to Taylor Park and different buildings and things like that we've had. However, there are hazard mitigation grants too that the township can apply for that may help with certain mitigation projects. It does depend what those projects are, but it sort of goes in the same vein as what we were talking about with the house raising project, as well as we've done emergency generators through hazard mitigation grant programs, but that is essentially what is offered to the municipality in terms of grants for mitigation.
So in the town's budget, because of this flood, will the committee be able to put more budget on flood related project?
Yeah, I assume, and I won't speak for the township committee, but however, if there are viable projects that have a benefit to the community and the area in terms of flooding and flood mitigation, I'm sure that money can be allocated quickly to make those projects happen.
Thank you. That's, I think, what's really needed, and for short-term relief, because lots of folks have mentioned, the drainage is one of a clear issue, and hopefully the town would put some money on improving, the drainage system or the pump stations right away, because clearly that would at least reduce the damage.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments, April.
Thank you.
All right. With that, we are going to close up this meeting. Again, I'm just going to repeat it over and over again. This is just the start of the conversation. We will continue to engage with the public and engage with John and others and working toward flood mitigation projects. I really appreciate everyone coming out for this discussion, and to make sure that we were able to hear from you and hear your concerns. For those that have answered or asked questions on the Q&A, we're going to have to pull that down after this meeting and answer some of those questions. Some of them were really good questions, and certainly some of them were questions we couldn't answer right away. But again, appreciate everybody being on this. I want to just thank John and Kevin for putting together the presentation, and the mayor for the introductions and being a part of all this, and everybody who participated, and all the residents. Thank you so much, and have a good night. And we look forward to having further discussions. Take care.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.